Yeah, in today's class, or in this section of our tutorial, we're going to be looking at a very important tool in Microsoft Excel called the Power Pivot. The Power Pivot. Power Pivot. Power Pivot is a very powerful tool used in Excel for data analysis. And Power Pivot is an advanced data modeling tool in Excel that allows us to analyze data and get insight from the data. It's more powerful than the pivot table and the lookup table. It helps us to analyze data across multiple tables. One good thing is there are several advantages of using the Power Pivots, and some of them are that the Power Pivot work with large data sets efficiently. Unlike the ordinary pivot table, Power Pivot can analyze millions of data sets in a moment. And another good thing about the Power Pivot is that it can create relationships between tables, just as in databases. We're going to look at that, how Power Pivot can be used to create relationships between tables. The Power Pivot also can perform powerful calculations using what we call the DAX, that is data analysis expression. That's one major feature you can find in the Power Pivot, data analysis expression. You can perform calculations using data analysis expression. And another good thing about the Power Pivot is that you can build pivot tables and dashboard with data from multiple sources. One of the things Power Pivot will give you the privilege to do is to build pivot tables and dashboards from multiple sources. So we're going to move into it gradually. But then first of all, I'd like us to open up our Microsoft Excel as we move on. I believe you have gone through my previous lectures before now, especially that of pivot tables. The Power Pivot is more or less like an advanced form of the pivot table. What the pivot table cannot do, the Power Pivot can handle it. So let's go ahead and open up our Excel. So I'll search for my Excel. I'm using Excel 2016, but take note that the Power Pivot feature can only be found from Microsoft Excel version 2010 up. Anything lower than 2010, you will not be able to enjoy the Power Pivot feature. So the Power Pivot feature, another thing I'd like us to look at briefly is, why do we use the Power Pivot? Why use the Power Pivot? Like I said before now, one, it handles big data. That is, it can process millions of rows of data, unlike the normal pivot table. And number two, it connects multiple tables. You may have multiple tables. You might not have any need for the VLOOKUP. You simply use the Power Pivot and you go ahead and create what we call relationships. And number three basically is that it is more it has more powerful calculation features like the DAX function that allows us to perform complex analysis. Now, if you look at your Microsoft Excel, you will notice that there is no tab here that represents the power pivot. One thing with the power pivot is that, one thing you must note is that power pivot comes with Excel, but must be turned on, or you must activate it before it begins to, before you can use it. And to activate the power pivot, once you open your Microsoft Excel, then what you do is, I'd like you to follow me gently, but make sure that you're using Microsoft Excel 2010 or higher versions. That is the only way you can use Power Pivot feature. But note that what I said is that you cannot see any tab here. Like you can see the file, the home, the insert, the page layout, the formulas, the data, the review, the view, and the rest of them. You cannot see the Power Pivot here now, but to activate the Power Pivot, we will simply click on the file, and when we click on the file, we will navigate down to account, to options. And when we come down to the options, a dialog box will appear. Now, you see Power Pivot among the add-ins. You click on add-in, look at this add-in. And once you click on add-in, you will notice all the add-in tools here. And if you go through this place gradually, you will eventually see Power Pivot somewhere here. Look at, let's search for it. Ooh. Okay, since it is not, okay, look at it. Microsoft, you can see that now. Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel. And you see the type. Under type, you see is a COM add-in. So because it's a COM add-in, you will now come to Manage. Under Manage, click on this arrow and select COM add-in. Remember, somewhere here we've seen that a Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel is a COM add-in tool. So we're selecting COM add-in, and you click on Go. See this Go. And once you click on Go, another dialog box appears showing you different options of the COM add-in. Look carefully and you will see Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel. Look at it here. Then you activate it by checking the box. And once this box is checked, you simply click on OK. And once you click on OK, you will notice the Power Pivot appears there. So now we have the Power Pivot showing there. You can pause the video briefly and try to go through it again and make an attempt to activate your own. Make sure that you're using Excel 2010 or above. Then go through the process. Look at the process again. You click on File, and from File, go to Options. From Options, you will see Add-ins. Select Add-ins, and eventually you come to Manage. Under Manage, you select COM add-in. And when you select COM add-in, you click on Go. Of course, you can see that in my own app it's activated already, but if it is not, I just activated it. If you want to reverse the process also, you can deactivate it and click OK. You notice that the Power Pivot tab is deactivated. So that's a very simple one. So let me go quickly ahead and activate it back again. Account, add-ins, and I come to this, I select COM add-ins and click on Go, and select check the Power Pivot for Excel and click on OK. And there I am. So that's a very simple way to activate your own Power Pivot. So go ahead and activate your own Power Pivot as we continue with the class. All right, the next thing we will do is to import our data into the Power Pivot, importing data into Power Pivot. Now, you can import data from an Excel table. You can also import data from your SQL database. You can also import data from a CSV files. You can also import data from online sources like SharePoint, GitHub, Google Drive, and the rest of them. So it depends on where you have your data set saved. But in this case, we're going to practice using two different scenarios, though they are similar. But I'd like you to take note of that as we move on. Now, join me. Let's see. We have a data set on the desktop. You can see the data set save the Power Pivot. Now, in this case, I want to add the data set. I'd like you to understand this data set first. Now, we have two data sets. One is the sales info. You can see sales info. And the second one is the product info. Now, let's begin with the product info. This product info has the following fields or headers. You have the product ID, you have the product name, the product category, and the price. Now, it is assumed that this table or this data set, the product info, gives us information about our different products. And each product has a name, and each product has an ID. I'd like you to take note of this because it's very important. Now, the reason for the product ID is to identify uniquely every product. Let me repeat this again. The essence of the product ID is to uniquely identify every product, because in some cases, two products might have the same name. Maybe a product that have different sizes. Now, the product will have the same name. So the only way you will be able to differentiate which of the sizes that you are talking about is by giving them the product ID. And in this product ID column, you will notice that each of the product ID are unique. No two products is supposed to have the same product ID. That is very important and worthy of note. So you take note of that. I will come later to expatiate on what we call table normalization and building a database. I'll come to that. But just understand that we have the product table and we have this product ID, just the same way you may have the names of students written down, and because you know two students may have the same name, so to differentiate them, you will now give them reg numbers to differentiate them. So this particular column that differentiates students, that holds unique data, we'll call it the primary key. But we're going to come to that later. Just hold on. When I will explain better, I will deal with that extensively. Let's just deal with the pivot table first. So we have the sales info. These are the sales info. Note that when you come to the sales info, we have or you can call it the order info. Okay, let me rename it as order info so that it can go with order. So you see, I'm just renaming this as order info. Although order and sales can be the same in some cases because it's believed that any product that has been ordered invariably has been sold too. So we have the order info. Of course, this order info will hold unique data because it helps us to identify each order. So when you want to make reference to a particular order, you can say the order with order number, so and so. So we have the product ID and the quantity. Now notice that in this order info, we didn't bother to use the product name. Instead, we will use the product ID. The reason is because we don't want to bring in a confusion where two products will have the same name and the names will be here. So that's not healthy at all for analysis. So since we know that no two products will have the same product ID, we therefore have to use the product ID here as as a column for the product that has been ordered. So we have the order ID, we have the product ID, and we have the quantity. All right. And in this product info, we have, let me zoom it a little bit. Okay. I hope you can see it clearer now. We have the product ID and the product name, category, and price. Okay. Having seen this now, I would like us now to move on to what we want to do. Now, how do we import data into the Power Pivot? That is what we're talking about now. I want to use this first example. I'm going to give two examples. But the example I want to give is in a case where the tables or the data sets you are using is already inside the Excel workbook as it is now. And I can, even if the tables are in an external data set, we can also import it in. So there are two ways. Is that you're dealing with internal data sets that are internal or data sets that are external. So we can have internal data sets and external data sets. So for in this case now, I have my data sets internal, just as you can see it now, the products and the info. Okay. The first thing I'm going to do is to convert this, to format this data sets as table. If you don't understand this, you can go back to my previous videos where I taught how to pivot table. It did more of this. So the first thing we'll do is to convert this data sets as table. And to do this, we highlight anywhere in the data set. You can look at the entire data set now we're dealing with here, and anywhere. Don't highlight outside the data set. Click on any of the cells in the data set, and from the Home tab, go to the style group. Look at the style group, and under the style group, you will see Format as Table. Click on the drop-down arrow and select any of the options, or any of the themes you select will do the work. It's just that the theme will vary with the option you selected. So if I select this now, if I select this, now a dialog box will appear asking me, where is the data for the table? Already the data has been highlighted. You can see the matching ant highlight showing the data has been highlighted. And look at this, make sure that this is checked. My table has header. If you refer to my previous classes, I explained this better. My table has header. Yes, because this is the table. It has header. See the header here, product ID, product name, category, and this. So this enclosure now, header has header. So Excel will assume that the first row, remember I told you previously that Excel will assume that the first row is the header. So if that is the case, you click OK, and this has been formatted as table. And when it's formatted as table, you will notice the contextual tab, table design, appear here. Click on it and then go to table name and name the table. Give the table a name. Don't forget about that. Give the table a name. And in this case, I will call it product info. No, don't give any space. You can see my own. I call it product underscore info. Don't give any space between the two words. Then hit enter. And the table has been named. Now go to the other table and do the same. So watch it again. Watch it again. Click on any of the cells in the table. Then go to the home tab and go to styles group and choose this. But alternatively, you may decide to use the shortcut Control T, Control plus T. That will also bring you exactly here to the dialog box here, where you can now click OK, and you see how the table change now. Look at the contextual tab again appearing, and you can see, click on it and then go to table name, and let me call the table order. Let me call it order underscore info. Remember, I said no space. Then I hit enter. So at this point, we have the two tables created, first of all, or the two data sets has been formatted as table. So the next thing we will do is to import the data into Power Pivot. So let's begin with the product table. To import the Power Pivot, to import the product info into the Power Pivot, what we will simply do is we'll go ahead and select any of the cells in the table. Then we'll click on Power Pivot. Then when you come to Power Pivot, you will notice some options, some key commands. Manage model, calculation, you see measures and KPIs, add to data models, dictate relationship and settings. Now, what we want to do is we want to add this data set to data model. Now, what we are attempting to do is to create what we call a data model. I will explain more about the data model at the end of this class. But just follow me. Once we get to the end, you'll be able to understand what we are talking about. So the next we'll do is click on add to data model. And when we click on add to data model, you will notice that the Power Pivot engine will open, bringing us to the Power Pivot environment. Now, I'd like you to take note of something here now. This is the Power Pivot environment. And you can see the table that we just added into the data model. Adding a table into the Power Pivot environment is what we call creating a data model. Creating a data model. Adding table into the Power Pivot. I will explain this later, but this is what we call creating a data model. Though there are a few other things that may be involved, but that's the primary thing there. Okay, let's go ahead. Now that we have the product info added the Power Pivot, I'd like you to take note. Look at this, Power Pivot for Excel. You can see we're in the Power Pivot environment, and you can see the home, the design, and advanced as the key tabs. But first of all, let's go back to home tab. First of all, I'd like to show you that this Power Pivot environment, or this Power Pivot runs inside Excel. it runs inside Excel. Microsoft Excel gives it an environment to run. Okay, let me minimize this and drag it out. Now, did you see that at the background here, we have our Microsoft Excel still open and running. But on top of the Microsoft Excel, you will now notice the Power Pivot environment running. That's what I want you to observe. I want you to get it clearly and look at it. You can see our product info and our other info right there. And then you can see in our Power Pivot, you can see that product info has now been added in the Power Pivot. These are very important things to note. Okay, what if I don't want this product info to remain in the Power Pivot? What if I want to remove it? It is very simple. I will come under the tab. Just take note that the Power Pivot environment looks a little similar in action and in structure to that of Excel, but there's a big difference. Now, if I come to product info and I click on it, I can delete it. And once I delete it, it means I've removed that product info from the Power Pivot environment. I can go ahead and close the Power Pivot environment, and yet I have my Excel environment still running. So this is something you must get clear. Try to pause the video and do it over and over again. Don't just watch it alone. Go through it with me. Click the mouse with me. Remember, our classes are Do It With Me series. So click the mouse with me and try to understand exactly what we're talking about. Okay, now that you've seen how to go in and out of the Power Pivot, then let's go ahead and add it back again. I right click. Okay, I click on this, and I go to click on any of the cells. Then I'll click on Power Pivot, and I go to add to data model. Add to data model, which means that the Power Pivot environment, it is the data model environment. It's a very simple case. The Power Pivot, this is very confusing to students at times, but it's very simple. The Power Pivot environment is the data model environment. So you click on Add to Data Model, and the data model environment opens again or activates again for you, and you will have the product info. Now, let's go ahead. Now that we've added the product info, let's go ahead and add the other info also. We can go ahead and close this. Closing it doesn't mean this will go. If you close it, if I want to go back to it again, once I click on my Power Pivot and I click on Manage, take note of this, Manage, it brings me back here. So you can see one good thing you must learn first of all here is how to go in and out of anything. Once you get into an environment, first of all, try to know how to go in and out so that you can be able to explore better. Okay, so let me close the Power Pivot. I want to add the second table now. I want to add the second table. So to go ahead and add the second table, look at the other info. I click on the other info, then click on any of the cells of the table. Make sure you didn't click outside. Click on any of the cells there. And once that is done, the next thing you simply do, you go to Power Pivot and say Add to Data Model. At this point now, we have added two tables. And look at it, the table 1, which is the product info, and look at the table 2, which is the other info. So it's so simple. What we've been able to build now is what we call data model. Data model. Data model is a simple phenomenon in Microsoft Excel, in data analysis generally. And I think you may need to understand deeper what data model is all about. But in our subsequent classes, I'm going to deal with it extensively so that it will make a little more meaning to us as we move on. But try to practice what I've just done now. Try to go through it, pause the video, go through it over and over again. And as you go through it, you'll understand relationships between the different data sets using DAX, that is data analysis expression, to perform advanced calculations, then possibly building reports and dashboards using the pivot table and so on. This is usually done, of course, using the Power Pivots. And what the Power Pivot does is to turn Excel into a mini database system. Generally, that's what it does. Now, there are some key components of a data model, of data modeling in Excel that you need to know. The first key component of data modeling is tables. Each data set should be in a separate table with column headers. Each data set in data modeling, each data set will be in a separate table. Example, customer info should be in a separate table. Order info in a separate table. Product info in a separate table. If you have other tables that solves particular problems, they should be in separate tables. Then you format the table properly by formatting it as table. Then the next thing is you talk about the relationship between the tables. In this case now, relationships are based on what we call primary keys. I think I'm going to illustrate this later. And after this lecture, I'm going to make a video to illustrate this because it's very important you take note of it. So let's return back to where we were. Remember, we already have our two tables already added to the Power Pivot environment, the product info and the order info. I believe the whole scenario was very clear. Then after that, the next thing we will have to do is to create relationships between the tables. Now, creating relationships between the tables is very, very crucial. In this case now, all you're trying to do is to let the product info recognize the order info, to make the order info know that the product info exists. But first of all, before you're able to achieve that, there are certain measures that must be in place. The table must be normalized. I'm going to deal with a normalized table later, but let me give a little explanation on that using the Excel table itself. Let me go up to Excel first. Now look at that, the tables in Excel. Remember, I can move from the Excel to Power Pivot. Like I'm in Excel now. If I want to go to Power Pivot, it's very simple. Either I click on Manage, but because it's already open, I just point at this and I see that one of these is Power Pivot. I click on it, I can open it. So the Power Pivot and Excel can be opened concurrently, just as you can see it. This is Power Pivot. This is Excel. I click on Excel. Now, if you look at this table closely, you realize that while I was setting up this table, something happened here. And that thing is that I was very careful to make sure that I used product ID here so that I can uniquely identify each product here. That I've explained before now. Now, and if you look at this order info, you will notice also that I also have product ID again. It is because I intend to have to create a relationship between the two tables. What I'm trying to teach you is what we call table normalization. That is structuring your table in such a way, structuring your table in such a way that there can be a relationship between the two tables. So to be able to create that avenue for relationship, I have in my products info, I have product ID. And my product ID column here has one feature, and that feature is that it holds unique data. I mean, in the product info here, you will notice that the product ID holds unique unique data like P001, P002, P003. But when you come to the other info, you will notice that the product ID here does not hold unique data. Like you have P001 and you also have P001 here. What does that really mean? Let me illustrate that now. Let me add some more data so you can understand. We have the product ID here. In this product ID, we have product ID P001, P002, P003. Now, in the order info, a customer comes to make an order. Let me extend this table a little bit now. Okay, a customer comes to make an order. That order should now be order 105. And the customer may choose to buy any of our three products. Remember, we have three products. The customer may choose to buy any of our three products. Let me assume he's buying product P003, which is chair. So I'll have P003. And that customer comes again and makes another 106. And if he makes another 106, he may choose to buy the same product the other person bought, which is P003 also. It continues. And that customer comes, makes another, maybe let me see, this is 5 also, and this is 9. And that customer may come in again, and this time around is order 07. And he may want to purchase products. He wants to buy laptop, which is P001. So we have P001. So from this now, you will notice that there is something that is unique. And that is, when you come to this particular table, the product table, no two products can have the same product ID. But if you come here, the same column product ID has duplicate values. But in the product info, no duplicate values. In this one, duplicate values. So it is based on that the relationship can stand. So the relationship can be between this table that has product ID that holds unique data and the other info that has product ID that does not hold unique data. So that is exactly on the basis of that. I'm going to come to this later to explain further. But if it's not too clear, you can rewind and go through it again, and you will understand better as we move on. So remember that if you notice something now, I just added to this now. I can assume the company has a new product that comes in, and that product is the company started selling something like a mouse. The company sells mouse now, and because the company sells mouse now, let me just follow the same mouse. And mouse can fall under electronics. electronics. And now mouse can be P004, and the price for each one is 2005. That's the cost per one. Then since a new product has been added now, did you now see that I added it in the product info table? Now, and I was very careful not to repeat any product ID because it is a new product and it must have its own product ID. Okay, so a customer might decide to order this. Let me assume that 3 different customers ordered this. So I can now have order 108 made, and that is the product is P004 order this time around, and this person ordered 6. Another person came and ordered again 109, and the P004, and he ordered 5. So that's it. And I can now go ahead and save it. Now, remember, before now, I've added the previous data set into the data model, into the Power Pivot. And now there is addition. Now that we have additional information, I can now go back to my data model. I still have the whole data as it is. Look at it. Still my 3 products in the product info, and still my 1, 2, 3, 4 products in my product. So what do I do in this case now? What I will do in this case now to update this to correspond with what we have in our Excel table, I simply come to refresh. Click on this arrow and I'll tell you to refresh all. To refresh all. If you say refresh, it may refresh only this table. If you say refresh all, look at what will happen now. Once you click on refresh all and you click on close. Okay, let's say refresh all. Let's see. You can now see data refresh in progress, refreshing, gets updated, success, and that's all. So since it has refreshed, you can click on close. And once you click on close, you will notice that this has been refreshed and the number of additions has been updated. And you go to product, see we have 4 products now instead of 3 we had previously. I'd like you to practice this. So whenever there's an addition, you want to add some things, you do that from Excel. And once you do it from Excel, you now come to your Power Pivot and refresh it. And that is it all. So that's about this. So we've added these 2 tables to the Power Pivot environment. The next thing will be to create a relationship between the 2 tables. So we have the 2 tables. How do we create a relationship? How do we marry them together? Now, this Power Pivot tool is preferred over the VLOOKUP because you can be able to create a relationship between these 2 tables in Power Pivot. So what do we do? Now that we're in Power Pivot, if you click on the Home tab, you take a look under this View group, you will notice Data View and you notice Diagram View. If you click on the Diagram View, you will see the 2 tables now appearing. So these are the 2 tables. You can see the product info, you see the order info. Remember that's in the Diagram View. If you click on the Data View, you return back again to that normal Data View where you can view the data added in the Power Pivot. I'd like you to understand these steps of going out and coming in, going forward and coming backward. Now, looking at this Diagram View, I click on it to have the 2 tables now. Now I have the 2 tables now. This is the environment where I can create a relationship. Now I want to create a relationship between the product info and the order info by way of telling the product info that there's a table called order info that both of you are related to. Now, this is what gave birth to what we call the parent table and the child table. In Excel, there's what we call the parent table and that's what we call the child table. The parent table, the product info is the parent table, while the other info is the child table. Let me repeat it again. The product info is the parent table, parent, like father and mother, while the other info is the child table. This, in a simple analogy, it simply shows that the parent table gives birth to the child table. That's what it looks like. If I may say, these orders were made because these products were available. If these products were not available, this order cannot be made. As a matter of fact, this table cannot exist. Let's go back here. Now, this order cannot be made if this product doesn't exist. Now, assuming that this product is not there, this order will be denied. So, which means that it is the existence of this product info that generated this order. That is the reason why we say that the product info is the parent table and the other info is the child table. Therefore, it means that if the product info is the parent table, then this product ID now is referred to as the primary key. The primary key is that column in the parent dataset that holds unique data. Primary key is that column or that field, like we have it product ID, in any table or any data set that holds unique data. Then we have in the other info, we have this column also, and this column is the column with which this product info will be related. Okay, let's go. So going to the diagram view. Now, how do we create a relationship between the product info and the other info? Is very simple. Remember, we have the product ID in the product info holding unique data, and it's called the primary key, and we have the corresponding key here, not holding unique data, and we call this foreign key. So in this data set where we have primary key, which is the column that holds unique data, in this table we have product ID that doesn't hold unique data, and that is called the foreign key. So how do we create the relationship? We create the relationship by clicking on the product ID, hold down your mouse, click and hold it down. Then drag it, you'll see a line following you. Drag it across on top of the product ID in the other info and drop it there. And once you do that, you will notice a line showing that a relationship has been established. This line shows that a relationship has been established, and that is as simple as that. So if you click on this product ID now, you will notice that there's a relationship between it and this because of this line. If I want to remove this relationship, I can right-click on this and say edit relationship. And once I say edit relationship, I will come to this place and decide to edit my relationship. You can see active. If I deactivate this and click OK, if I click OK, you will notice that a relationship exists, but it is not active. There's a relationship, you see the dotted lines showing that a relationship is existing, but it is not active. To make it active again, I right click and go to relationship and eventually click on active and click OK. And once I click OK, you can see the line has become thick again to show that a relationship also has been established. Now, how do I do away with this relationship? Assuming I want to do away with this relationship, how do I do away with it? If I come to this line, this time around now, I'm not. If you right click on this arrow, it shows you a relationship. But if you right click on the line, you will see delete relationship, edit relationship, mark as inactive. So let's click on delete relationship, and I click on delete from model. And once I do that, you will notice that the relationship has been deleted. So that is it. Looking at this closely, we've been able to create relationship. That's our data model, and we can go ahead and close our Power Pivot. Remember, we can click on Manage again to return back to it, and you can close it now and decide to save our work. And when we save our work, we can now close. So with this, we will pause a moment and I'll allow you to go through the class briefly, and after that, we will continue. So you go through. Now that we have succeeded in creating the data model, and this is a data model, we can have the product info and the order info. The next thing we will do is to create a pivot table from this data model. To create a pivot table based on this data model, that is creating a pivot table using this Power Pivot data. Remember, we've treated pivot table. If you've not gone through my tutorial on pivot table, you might need to go back to it so that you can become a little more conversant with it. But it has become so simple at this point that we have product info and we have order info. Now, the reason why this is important, or this is preferred over pivot table, is that the two or the information we want to pivot are in both tables. For example, we want to get the name of the products and the quantities ordered. The name of the products and the quantities of each that is ordered. So what we want the pivot table to do for us now is tell us the total number of laptop that is ordered, total number of phone, total number of each of these products. And this is not so easy to be handled in pivot table because as you can see, we have one of the parameters we need, which is the product name on product info. And we have the second parameter we need, or the second field we need, which is the quantity on another table. So that is the challenging thing that we have there. So what we simply need to do now is, because we knew this was exactly a problem we had that made us to invoke the Power Pivot method, or to go into the data model or data modeling, we will now have to go to our product or any of our tables, click into it, and then we will now go to the home tab. From the home tab, we will now come under get external data, okay, and we see pivot table. Click on the drop down arrow and select pivot table. Once you select the pivot table, a dialog box will appear. You can go ahead and select new worksheet and click OK. Once you click OK, notice that the pivot table page is now created on Excel. If you notice, you will see our product info in Excel, order info in Excel, and beside it is the pivot page. That's one good thing. Remember, we can point here and get across to our Power Pivot. But what has happened now is that on our Excel book is now the Power Pivot. And look at the right-hand side now. You will notice that in the two tables we have, the order info and the product info. So can you now see now that what pivot table cannot do, Power Pivot has done it. And what is that Power Pivot has just done now? What Power Pivot has just done now is to present us the two tables so that I can open this first table, select any column I want, close it, open the second table, select any column I want now. This is one thing that pivot table could not do. All that pivot table was able to do was to only give us one table at a time. But Power Pivot can give us more than one tables. It can give us 2, 3, 4, depending on the number of tables we added in the data model. And also depending on the number of data sets that were formatted as table in our Excel workbook. So what I want to do now is I will come to the product info. What I need is the product name. So I drag the product name to row. Remember our pivot table. And it gives me the distinct product names. I will now go back to the order info and drag my quantity down to value. And automatically you will now notice that a pivot table has been prepared, but that is indicating an error here. Let us see, let's check the relationship. You remember that, can you see an error here? 43, 43, 43, which means that something is wrong. So we might need to go back to the Power Pivots and confirm and make sure that the relationship we created is still there. And to do that, we'll go to this. And you can see that now. There is no relationship. We mistakenly removed the relationship. That was the reason why we are having this error we have here, having the whole of them. So take note, that's an ingenuity too. So the reason why we have this after pivoting 43, 43, 43 is to show that there is no relationship between the two tables. But because we deactivated it, so we'll go back to the Power Pivot and now create a relationship. I believe by now you can be able to create a relationship. You drag the product and you drop it on this product here. A relationship has been created now. So we can now go back to our Excel. And you will notice that, bingo, did you see that now? Automatically it has changed. You can now see the power of relationship. So number of chairs, you can manually, why I use small data sets is so that you can manually even calculate to verify. Because in our next project, in our next tutorial, we're going to be doing a major project. We're going to be handling a real life project on this pivot table. But I used two data sets so that the illustration you can do it automatically and also reconfirm it manually. So you can now see that in our pivot table, we have 19 chairs, total of 12 laptops, 11 mice, and just one phone, making a total of 43. So I think from here now, you can push on because we've done pivot table. With this now, I believe we have done a lot here. But one more thing I want to bring in is how to use the data analysis expression in this case. How to use, I'm going to introduce this a little, but later we're going to expand on it on a separate topic. I will deal with data analysis expression on a separate tutorial, and you will get to see it soon. But then looking at this now, I'd like us to go back to our Power Pivot. Remember, to go back to my Power Pivot, I can go ahead and click on Manage or I come to this icon here and select it. But let me click on manage, and this the Power Pivot. So I go to data view. Now, in this case now, I'm going to apply a little of the data analysis expression. This is the calculation engine that powers Power Pivot, that controls Power Pivot. Is used in Power Pivot for advanced calculations. I'm going to do one or two, but I will dedicate a tutorial to it in the next class so you can understand well. Now, looking at this order info, you will notice that we have the order ID, we have the product ID, we have the quantity, but we don't have, assuming I want to know the revenue, I want to know how much each person paid. For example, for this product P001, 2 pieces were ordered. To what's the amount that was paid for it? We can't get the amount without knowing the unit price, the cost for one. So to get the cost for one, maybe I will double click on this column, and what I will need to do is I can now say unit cost. So I'm going to get a unit cost. It is this unit cost now that I will multiply by the quantity to get the revenue. So I have another column here, and I can call it revenue or total costs of each order. So this gives us the total cost. So we're going to get the unit cost, because our major interest is to get the total cost of each order. But before that, we don't have the unit cost. But in the other table, product info, we have the unit cost, which is price here. You can see that's the price for each of the items. So what do? When we have the price here, and we don't have it there, but we need it here. So what we will need simply is to use a special function. I'm going to deal with that, but I only want to just complete this process. We'll use a special function called the related. So once I say equal to related, and I'll open a bracket, and if I related to price, what I want to bring over is a way of automatically bringing over the price column to this order info. I want to type price, and as I'm typing price, you will see product info price. Now this shows that this price is actually located in product info. That's what it means. I will double click on this to have it and close the brackets. So once I hit enter, you notice that the price automatically will position itself automatically. Instead of you typing it one by one, you notice that price will automatically positioned over here. Let me repeat this again. I delete this, and I want to bring over this is not the total cost. This is the unit cost. The unit cost. That's unit costs. That is it. The unit cost. And to get the unit cost over here, remember that is the price here. But I choose to call it the unit cost here, because that is the cost per one item, what one item costs. So to get it, I'll remember the column we want to bring over is this price column. and is located in product info. So we want to bring it over to order info. I will use the related command equal to related. I'll type related and open a bracket. And if I open a bracket, because it's price, as I'm trying to type price, the IntelliSense will suggest to me product price, and that's what I'm looking for. I will now double click on it and close the bracket, hit enter, and that automatically brings it over. The next column we will look at is the total cost, total cost. Now, to get the total cost, remember, the total cost should be the quantity multiplied by unit cost. But it slightly differs from the way we perform calculations in Excel. That is why we call it data analysis expression, DAX. It's slightly different. Now, for me to multiply this and this, I will now have to put equal to first. Remember, equal to, I will now equal to quantity. Quantity in data analysis expression, we don't multiply by cells. We multiply by the column name. So equal to quantity. As I begin to type the quantity, IntelliSense will suggest many names for me. And you can see that the quantity I'm actually referring to is the quantity in order info. I'll double click on it. You see that? So multiplication is the asterisk sign multiplied by the unit cost. I will now say unit. You see, the unit cost I'm talking about, IntelliSense helps me. I believe by now you are used to the Excel IntelliSense. It tells me order underscore info. That's what I'm referring to also. So I'll double click on it. And as soon as I hit enter, it will fill up this. It fills it up. Oh, that's beautiful. So from here now, you can now see that it's easy to note that the unit cost is 150 and the total is this, and so on. That makes it so easy for us to understand. I can go ahead and perform a pivot table, go to pivot, and in this case now, I want to put my pivot in a new sheet also. And then what I want to get now is the product. Let me get the product category and the sum. Well, the product category I need is in product info, and the total sum. I have total costs. So with this now, you can see the total amount of money realized from each of the two categories that we have. So you can see the first category, electronics, and the second one is furniture. You can see the total amount of money realized from each of them. And that makes it a little easy for us to work with. So that's quite amazing. And I believe we've done justice to this tutorial for now. I'd like you to pause the video, try to go through over and over again. The data set we used in this tutorial is not large, so you can easily replicate it. And if you want to get the note for this tutorial, you can check the description section of this tutorial to download a comprehensive note on this. In our next class, we will quickly look at or consider a major project on Power Pivot. And then with this, we will drive home the point. Try to go through the lecture, and you're free to make your notes and make it comprehensive. Find someone and teach. Remember, you have a grasp of what you've been taught to up to the tune of 90%. when you teach someone. So I recommend for you, go ahead, get somebody to teach, and that way. Now to show you one more thing, in this tutorial, to show you one more thing before we go, remember that at the beginning, when we wanted to add our data set into Power Pivot, we used the internal method where we had the data sets internally in our Excel when we use the add data model. Now, what if we have this Power Pivot 2 file as our data set? Let me open it, containing order info and product info. And we want to import it into our work on a fresh. Let me press Control N to give me a new Excel worksheet. You can see a new book 1. And I want to import those data sets into my Power Pivot directly here. What I will do is, this time around, if I click on Power Pivot, remember I don't have the data set here, so it becomes difficult for me to proceed with using add to data model. But if I click on manage Power Pivot, it brings me into a Power Pivot engine where I can go to get external data. I can get data from database. I can get data from data service, and you can see from other sources. You can see from existing connection. But this one, because I have an Excel here, I have an Excel data set here I want to connect it to. Then what I will simply do is I'll click on from other sources. And once I click, I will scroll down. I will see several other sources, but I want to connect from Excel. Import data from an Excel file. Click on this, I click next. And when you click next, you can see Excel file path. You enter the file path here, but if you don't know the file path, you can browse and navigate to the location. Remember, the file is on the desktop. I scroll down to the file, Power Pivot 2. Look at it. I'll click on it and open. Don't forget to highlight use first row as column header. Don't forget, use first row as column header. Remember that Excel automatically, we want to recognize the first row as column header. Click on it, and then you can go ahead and say test connection, but I have no problem with that. I'll click on next because I'm sure my connection will work, and I will see the two tables. I will select the two tables, or the tables I want to select. I can have more than two tables, but I can choose these two, and I click on finish. And once I click on finish, you will notice that the two data sets have been successfully imported. What I will simply need to do is to click OK, and beautiful, I can see the two data sets now. Did you see how I simply imported these two data sets? I can now go ahead and click on diagram view and go ahead and create the relationship to make the data model. And when I'm done with that, I can go ahead and click on pivot to pivot, and then that's it all. You can rewind the video and go through it over and over again. It's quite an amazing class, quite exciting, and I'd like you to do that, and you'll see how amazing the Power Pivot is. Don't forget where we started from. Try to go through again. Remember, we started from trying to activate Power Pivot and down to using it to create a pivot table. Thank you for being in this lecture. Thank you for going through it to the end. I'd like you to expect the next lecture, which will be a special project on Power Pivots. See you till then.